Welcome, believers. Welcome, you wonderfully weird people. Welcome to UFO Aliens and Weird Stuff. Now, as we know, for nearly a century, or longer than that actually, there has been an understanding, right? Not written, not spoken aloud, but 100% reinforced again and again and again, right? That whatever people they saw in the sky, if you saw something weird in the sky, it wasn't what you thought it was, right? It wasn't a UFO. Even though lights that moved too fast, objects that hovered without sound, shapes that appeared and vanished, there was always another explanation as far as the governmental bodies were concerned, wasn't there, right? Weather balloons, okay, that's a famous one. Experimental aircraft, kind of can't argue with that one. Atmospheric illusions, swamp gas, anything but you unidentified flying objects, right? You were ridiculed, you were made to look stupid, and, you know, like I say, swamp gas, balloons, come on, man, we're not that stupid. Then, in 2026, right, or should I say was it 2025, that understanding began to collapse, well, kind of. And it started with a post, right? Now, whether you like this man or not, I don't know. Donald Trump on social media, right, unlike the rumours, unlike the speculations, this was quite direct. It was quite unfiltered. The typical Trump, right? Based on the tremendous interest shown, he said, I will be directing the Secretary of War and other relevant departments and agencies to begin the process of identifying and releasing government files related to alien and extraterrestrial life. UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, unidentified flying object, UFOs, and any and all other information connected to this highly complex but extremely interesting and important matters, right? And he signs off for God Bless America. Now, at first, it sounded like everything that had come before. Another bold claim, another headline, your typical everyday politician talk, you know, basically spouting rubbish. But then I've noticed, right, that something actually has happened, right? The Pentagon did confirm it. Not quietly, not vaguely. It is out there. They are releasing these files, right? Declassified files, some dating back to the late 1940s. And they are being released to the public. A central archive has been created. And I found it, right? So if you go on the internet, right, and you look, I don't know, say Trump UFO Files or whatever, it will take you to a website and it's there. You can check, well, you can check anything, really. You can check military footage, that's there. Infrared imagery, something that kind of confused me, but that is there. Pilot encounters, intelligence reports. You don't need any clearance to go on this. There is no restrictions. For the first time, as far as I know, the question wasn't being dismissed. It was being opened and possibly even talked about. Are UFOs real? Yes, they bloody well are, right? You can do it as a journalist. You can do it as an ordinary person. You can go combing through these files. But as you do, as we all know, right, a pattern does start to emerge. These sightings aren't all random, they're kind of clustered. But we already knew that, right? They're clustered around military bases. There's a load of files on that. Operational zones, high surveillance regions, right? There was a lot, apparently, in Cold War Europe. I mean, we know them as the Foo Fighters, but there was a lot more than that, especially in Germany, right? And, of course, in modern times, apparently, I'm going to check this out later, there's a load going on in the Middle East, of course, the Straits of Hormuz, Iraq and Syria. There's a lot of buzzing going on there. And I reckon it's because we are noticing it, because, you know, these skies are already being watched for other stuff, not UFOs, for human-related crafts, right? So, of course, you tend to see it more. Which raised a question no one could easily ask. If UFOs don't exist and there is nothing there, why does it keep appearing? Okay, so look, as I say, if you look the hardest and you look and you keep looking, you will see some weird stuff, right? Now, the majority of reports come from military personnel, and I generally love them. Pilots trained to recognise every known aircraft profile, every known flight behaviour, and every known atmospheric anomaly, right? And yet, they describe the same things, and we know, don't we? Objects that accelerate instantly, that hover without drift, that change directions without momentum, right? You know, pew, pew, you know, pew, pew. You know, that if it was a human in there, they'd be squashed against the wall. Others remain perfectly still. You know, no sign of propulsion or rotors before disappearing completely. As I say, no propulsion, no sound, no explanation. And there's loads of these on the files. So check it out. It is really interesting. Now, buried deep within the files was one report that stood out, as I noticed, right? An FBI 302 interview. Now, I don't know what that means, but it sounds kind of official, doesn't it? A senior intelligence official with first-hand testimony. And I'll tell you the story. So this is just one that I've come across, right? A search operation has been launched. Personnel was sent to a location where strange aerial phenomena have been reported repeatedly, right? So they searched from above, they scanned the terrain, they carried on watching like you do, waiting for weird anomalies, you know, waiting for something strange until they actually found it, apparently, right? A superheated orb, that's what it says. A superheated orb hovering just above the ground. Now censored, registered extreme heat, far beyond what any known aerial system should produce. It wasn't drifting, it wasn't reacting, it was just simply controlled, right? Hovering, an orb with intense heat. Then, like they often do without warning, it moved 20 miles. It moved 20 miles at a speed too fast for the pursuing helicopters. So this orb, this extremely hot, round, orby thing, shot off and the helicopters couldn't keep up. And then, apparently, more appeared. That's the thing. Wasn't just one individual orb, there was a swarm of lights. 4, maybe 5 additional orbs, each one flaring into existence, glowing intensely, then fading out. What's weird, isn't it? This is from an FBI file, right? So, up and down they went, apparently. Up and down, and then simply gone. And then back again, right? So they disappeared, disappeared, appeared, and the pattern repeated for 30 minutes. No sound, no visible propulsion, no known explanation. The report was partially, as far as I can make out, redacted. But look, you are going to get a hell of a lot of redacted files, aren't you? Names removed, of course, that would be. Locations hidden. Okay, well, they've got to do that. But the event itself remained intact. So this event is on the files. And then apparently, weeks later, something changed. From late November through to early December 2024, the sightings surged. Not in one place, not just one area. These aren't isolated. They were pretty much global, and I think we all remember them. Remember Christmas 2024? You know, when we had all those orb sightings near Langley Air Force Base. Luminous objects were recorded moving through restricted airspace. 17 consecutive nights of drone incursions. We never found out what that was. Different shapes, different formations, always after dark, across the Atlantic at RAF Lakenheath. Mobile, unidentified aerial systems breached controlled airspace. Well, if you think about it, that's quite dangerous. You know, that is on the verge of a Third World War stuff, right? They were all tracked, they were all observed, but they were never identified. What was that? You know, and then if you notice, everyone just stops talking about them. Right, and then you had December the 1st, Arizona. A stationary object in the sky. 3 helicopters circled it, obviously not engaging, right? So, you know, not starting a Third World War, no firing or anything like that. They were just watching this thing for 30 minutes. And it remained, shall we say, still. Right, for 30 minutes, it just sat there. The helicopters followed it, then it just left. Right, that was December the 1st. December the 7th, near Oregon, Eugene, Oregon, is that how I pronounce it? Pilots reported red circular objects. Now, like all of them, extreme speeds, climbing, diving, spiraling, all right, beyond human capability. One pilot said, I don't even know how to describe how fast it's moving. Now, of course, air traffic control responded and manoeuvred as necessary. All right, but look, it was gone. It was gone. Over Idaho at 34,000 foot, a pilot observed lights that did not move with distance. They remained fixed. So 34,000 feet in the air, lights were just hovering there. They remained fixed, too bright to be satellites, too distant to be an aircraft, and they just sat there watching. Simply just sat there. What were they watching? Sat there, just watching from above. Now, obviously, these files stretch further back. Of course they do, right? But these are just some of the stories from the files, so check it out. Apparently, astronaut Buzz Aldrin reported a bright object in space, described as a possible light source, logged, never fully explained. Now, there is a lot about that. Collins apparently saw something, right? And he was never allowed to talk about it, right? Now, if there is nothing out there, and NASA isn't scared of anything, then why did they silence Collins and tell him not to say anything? Another file described an object, right? Okay. Ellipsoid, metallic, ellipsoid. I don't even know what that is. Metallic, bronze in appearance, measuring up to 195 foot. Now, I think ellipsoid means egg-shaped. All right. So egg-shaped, metallic, bronze in appearance, measuring up to 195 feet, appearing out of light and disappearing instantly. So it was not there, then it was there, then it wasn't there again. I mean, what's that about? Now, among hundreds of documents, one stood out. And this, believe it or not, was highlighted by The Sun, a British newspaper. And it's an FBI memo dated October the 19th, 1966, describing reports from what was called the greatest year of UFO sightings. Now, the witness described a craft that hovered silently, then accelerated at fantastic speeds, objects that interfered with electromagnetic systems, we know that happens, grounds scorched beneath hovering vehicles, and in some cases, occupants, figures, proper aliens. And they were about 3 to 4 foot tall, wearing suits and helmets, apparently, and they were seen exiting the craft. They were seen leaving the craft. Recovered debris was also described. Unknown metals. Now, apparently, one sample, an exceptionally hard material embedded with thousands of microscopic spheres. Other samples, magnesium alloys and pure magnesium, all unlike conventional aerospace materials. All right, and that comes from The Sun. And I know that sounds a bit vague. It's not a fantastic story. But remember, we are reading this from redacted files. So for decades, these stories were dismissed. And I can tell you that because in the 80s and 70s, if you talked about UFOs, you were called an idiot. All right, people looked at you and go, right? That's what they said. That is what they said. Right, and UFO documentaries were done is tongue in cheek and more to ridicule than to investigate. Things have really, really changed now. So these stories aren't dismissed anymore. Now they're documented. All right, and the files are open. The sightings are also increasing. But I think that's because more people are interested in looking up, right? The patterns are repeating. So maybe, just maybe, the truth isn't that we're discovering something new, because obviously we are not, right? Maybe the story's always been out there, but the beauty about modern times, the beauty about phones, cameras, they're so readily available. The fact that people can talk about UFOs now and be taken seriously means that more people are investigating it and looking up. So what do you think? Okay, the FB files are out there, and I love to scroll through them. So check the website out, it is well worth it. and we can go from there. Right, well, this was UFO Aliens and Weird Stuff. Do you think discoveries are possible? I don't, to be honest with you. I hate to sound negative. I hate to sound like, I don't know, a negative person, But I genuinely don't think discovery is going to happen. Like I always say, the FBI files, they can release it, but there's always a little disclaimer in there going, well, they might not be aliens. We know they are. All right, we know they're aliens. All right, what aliens are is a different thing. Interdimensional. I'm not even going to dismiss the demon idea, to be fair with you, because I simply don't know. All I know is they're far more sophisticated than what we are. Hopefully they're a lot more spiritual, because humans are pretty scummy as it goes, to be honest with you. We have got a vast decades, hundreds of years, even thousands of years before we're at a place where, we're decent. We're no longer fighting over turf, or oil. There is a rumour in there. There is a rumour, of course, that all these unscrupulous governments are keeping these clean energies, aren't they? They're cleaning it to themselves so they can make loads and loads of money. Until we get past that greed, that corruption, we will never move forward. All right, well, this was UFO Aliens and Weird Stuff. I really appreciate sticking around. I really do. Like, subscribe and ding that notification bell if you can. Follow my YouTube channel. That would be fantastic. And I'll catch you next week. Thank you.